In the late 19th century, a daring expedition set sail on an audacious quest to find an ice-free path to the North Pole. Intriguing explorers and geographers for years, this theory of an open polar sea seemed to be within grasp when the USS Jeannette, a meticulously equipped ship, was sent into the icy unknown. Under the command of George W. DeLong, and backed by the prominent New York Herald owner, James Gordon Bennett, the crew of 33 embarked on their journey, departing from San Francisco on a summer day in 1879. For all their hopes and preparations, they found themselves trapped in thickening ice, their ship drifting aimlessly as the unforgiving Arctic winter set in. But the crew, resolute and determined, conducted scientific observations that debunked the very theory they had set out to prove. And then, just when you thought their ordeal must surely be over, the ice returned, leading to... Well, let's keep the suspense for a bit longer, shall we? What's up, my amazing and curious folks? I'm your host, Cesar Chagas, ready to carry you on a journey into the unknown, to unravel the mysteries of our world. Ready to explore the unexplored? With me here is the brilliant and vibrant Sonia, my trusty accomplice and commentator. But before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our adventures on the Curiosity Wonderland. We're here every day, ready to quench your thirst for knowledge.
Hi everyone, so excited to dive into today's topic. Let's get started, shall we?
The Arctic, my dear listeners, a realm of mystery and untamed beauty, has been the centerpiece of many exploratory expeditions since time immemorial. But the story we're discussing today dates back to the mid-19th century, an era when explorers and geographers were captivated by a possibility proposed by English cartographer Robert Thorne in the 16th century. The idea, a vast ocean free of ice encircling the North Pole. Now think about it, a clear, navigable path in the Arctic would mean a direct route between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. Much easier than going around the Cape of Horn, right? And many a brave explorer, folks like Elisha Kane, Isaac Israel Hayes, Charles Francis Hall, and George Nares, claim to have laid eyes on this fabled ocean. Their accounts only fueled optimism in the theory and spurred others to push for its validation. One of the true believers was a leading cartographer from Germany, August Petermann. He was convinced that following the Gulf Stream, which coursed up the coast of Norway towards the unexplored Arctic regions, one could cross the protective ice ring and reach the heart of this ice-free ocean. In his attempt to validate this theory, Petermann backed two Arctic expeditions: the German North Polar Expedition of 1869, led by Karl Koldewey, and the Austro-Hungarian North Pole Expedition of 1872, helmed by Karl Weiprecht and Julius von Payer. But alas, when these expeditions were unable to penetrate the ice barrier as Petermann had anticipated, his optimism took a hit. Now enters the scene James Gordon Bennett, owner of the New York Herald. Intrigued by Petermann's theories, he travels all the way to Gotha to discuss possible Arctic routes with our intrepid cartographer. Now Petermann, having failed to find a way to the Arctic Ocean through the Gulf Stream, sets his sights on the Bering Strait. He theorized that a branch of the Kuro-Siwo, a warm ocean current in the North Pacific Ocean, flowed through the Bering Strait and might be powerful enough to create a path to the Polar Sea. Bennett, sufficiently impressed by Petermann's theory, decides to support a new American polar venture. And the first task? Find a suitable ship. Enter George W. DeLong, a U.S. Navy officer and explorer who procures a 142 feet, 570-ton Royal Navy gunboat from England. The vessel, originally named Pandora, is renamed the USS Jeannette and sets the stage for an incredible journey into the great white unknown. But what was to come? Well, stay tuned to find out. So DeLong spent 2 years outfitting the USS Jeannette with necessary tools and scientific equipment. He even included a darkroom and an observatory. He hired a crew of 33, many of them veterans of previous Arctic explorations.
That's quite some preparation, so they were ready for anything, I guess.
Indeed, they set sail from San Francisco on July 8, 1879. Initially, they made good progress, but by September, they were trapped in thickening ice near Wrangell's Land.
Trapped? You mean they couldn't move at all?
Exactly. The Jeannette was encased in ice, unable to move. The crew spent the winter analyzing sea currents, salinity, and temperature, discovering that the Kuroshio had no effect north of the Bering Strait. In effect, the credibility of the open polar sea theory began to wane.
That must have been such a blow to their morale.
Absolutely. Summer came, but the Jeannette didn't budge. Yet, with the arrival of the second Arctic summer, there was new hope that they would finally break free.
But did they?
Unfortunately, no. On June 12, 1881, the ice returned with renewed force, damaging the ship beyond repair. DeLong decided to evacuate, and a day later, the Jeannette sank approximately 300 nautical miles off the Siberian coast.
How terrible. That must have been so heartbreaking for the crew. They had put in so much effort, and then to see their ship sink.
Yes, it was a tragic end to the expedition, and an immense challenge for the crew, who then had to drag their boats over the ice after abandoning their ship, a testament to the harsh conditions and unpredictable nature of Arctic exploration. So the stranded crew began a grueling trek to the Siberian coast, with their boats and supplies, aiming for the Lena Delta. By August, the ice began to break up, and they transferred to the boats. On the 10th of September, they reached a small island, fewer than 100 nautical miles from the Siberian coast. After some rest, they braved the last leg of their journey to the Lena Delta. It reminds me of a recent event, a group of mountain climbers who were stranded on a mountain due to sudden bad weather. Like DeLong's team, they had to endure harsh conditions, rely on dwindling supplies, and maintain their hope and unity to survive.
It's funny you mention that because I just read a similar story about a group of scientists who were stranded in the Antarctic. They were waiting for a rescue team that was delayed due to extreme weather conditions. And like DeLong's crew, they had to rely on limited supplies and each other's company to keep up their spirits.
Exactly. Now, back to our story. Unfortunately, while at sea, a violent storm capsized one of the boats, and 7 men perished. The other 2, led by DeLong and Chief Engineer George W. Melville, managed to make landfall at separate points on the delta. DeLong's party began the treacherous journey inland, but progress was excruciatingly slow. They eventually reached an abandoned hunting camp where they found some shelter and sustenance. Despite the hardships, DeLong sent 2 of his strongest men, William F. C. Nindeman and Louis P. Noros, ahead for help. They managed to find a settlement and survived.
So there was still hope for the rest of the crew?
Yes, but time and energy were running out. The men were starving and exhausted. DeLong's entries in his journal became terse with each passing day, mostly recording the death of his men. Meanwhile, on the other side of the delta, Melville and his party had managed to find a native village. From there, he learned of DeLong's plight and his urgent need for rescue. Despite his efforts, the incoming winter forced him to return without locating DeLong and his comrades. The Arctic, as we're learning, is a harsh and unforgiving landscape. When spring arrived, Melville set out once again, this time successfully finding the frozen bodies of DeLong and his companions. They were laid to rest in makeshift coffins crafted from driftwood, covered in rocks, and topped with a large wooden cross bearing their names.
That's such a tragic end. But I'm guessing it wasn't the end of the story?
You're right. Curiously, wreckage from the Jeannette was found near Greenland almost 3 years later, which led to the realization of a current flowing from east to west across the polar sea. This discovery was pivotal for the planning of Nansen's successful Fram expedition a few years later.
So, in a way, their tragic misfortune led to important discoveries?
Absolutely. Despite the tragic end, the Jeannette Expedition greatly contributed to science. They explored and mapped hundreds of miles of previously uncharted territory, provided valuable oceanographic and meteorological measurements, and debunked the Kuroshio theory. Moreover, they discovered 2 unknown islands, Henrietta Island and Jeannette Island, named after DeLong's mother and the ship, respectively. So while the expedition didn't achieve its primary goal, it did leave a lasting legacy in scientific exploration.
A silver lining indeed. It's remarkable how such tragic events can still lead to significant scientific advancements.
That's true. And interestingly, in 2015, there were plans announced by a leading Russian media personality to raise the wreck of the Jeannette from the icy depths. But despite locating the spot where she sank, she was nowhere to be found. As of December 2019, the Jeannette remains untraceable, further adding to the air of mystery that surrounds this Arctic expedition. So there you have it, folks. The Jeannette Expedition, a valiant but ill-fated attempt to discover an ice-free route to the North Pole, is a tale of human resilience in the face of insurmountable odds. Despite their failure to reach their primary goal, the crew contributed significantly to scientific knowledge. Yet the ship remains as elusive as the ice-free sea they sought, lost in the icy depths of the Arctic. And who knows? Maybe the Jeannette is still out there, on a secret journey of her own through an open polar sea. Now, wouldn't that be something?
Absolutely. It's fascinating how our past continues to shape our understanding and exploration of the world. We want to thank you all for joining us on this journey through history and mystery on Curiosity Wonderland. Don't forget to blast that like button and drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the Jeannette Expedition and any other Arctic mysteries you'd like us to explore. And of course, share this episode with your friends, so they can also dive into the icy depths of the past with us. Until next time, everyone, stay curious.
And keep exploring. Goodbye, and thank you for joining us on Curiosity Wonderland. Today's incredible tale was sourced from an article titled The Ill-Fated Jeannette Expedition to the Arctic on a Musing Planet, authored by Kaushik Patawari and published on January 13, 2024. For those who'd like to further investigate this fascinating story, we've provided the full URL in the video description. And with that, I'm signing off. Goodbye, everyone.